Hey everyone, my name is Nick. I'm the CEO of Doc, and welcome to Identity, a podcast all about digital identity and Web3. And I'm delighted to be joined by Russ Cohn today. He is the Senior Vice President of Go-to-Market for IDVerse. Thanks for joining us, Russ.
Good to be here. Thanks, Nick, for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Russ, could we start off then by, it'd be great if you could give us an introduction to both yourself, a little bit your background, and then also your role at IDVerse.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I'm running go-to-market at IDVerse now, ID verification company. So we do fully automated ID verification globally for customers, mainly in banking, telcos, but we're diversifying as we expand. So I've been at IDVerse, which was formerly known as OCR Labs. We changed our name in the summer of this year. We rebranded it Money 2020. And I've been with the company about 3 years, and I came in as an investor, actually, and then now turned operator. So with the need of the company and through the growth of COVID, I was the first international employee. So came on to help them with their marketing and commercial plans, and have grown the company. And now, more than half of our company is international outside of Australia, which is our original founding country. My background is diverse. I've been in technology for about 25 years. So I used to spend most of my time in advertising, online advertising and marketing. In search predominantly. So I spent quite a bit of time in search advertising, from the initial working for the inventors of paid search, go2.com, to Google, and spending some time building the business out of the UK there as well. I then I stayed in media and online digital for quite a while, and turned to investing about 5 years ago, and investing in early stage startups, venture capital. And that's where our investment in OCR Labs came from originally. And we've helped to shepherd and grow the company and continue to help them grow. So changed industries a few times, came from Cape Town in South Africa originally, and immigrated about 24 years ago. And I live in London with my family, with my two daughters and wife.
Fantastic. And what made the change, Russ, from the investor side into the operator side? Is there any kind of insights that you can give us there?
Our venture capital firm, Hulken Ventures, the ethos behind our investing was very much to shepherd early stage investors. So it was pretty much early stage seed investment. And at that stage, if anyone's worked in businesses of that size, you need the support of people around you. You don't have a big team. There's always a lot on. And we very much like to put our arms around investors and support them with the critical functions that they need in order to grow and get through that stage and make sure they survive, which is pretty important. A lot of businesses fail in the early stage, lack of capital, etc. So Hulken Ventures came out of an accounting business, so we were very much financially focused in helping with the accounting side and cash flow management and helping businesses to be sustainable. I came in with a slightly different experience around sales and marketing and running commercial and digital, and so I added that value to the venture capital business and helped the customers that we had, the clients and investments that we made, to shepherd them through that stage and help them with building those critical roles when they didn't have them within the business. So that's essentially where we came from and how we invested. And we continue to have a portfolio of investments that early stage that we make globally across industries. And IDVerse was one of those where my CEO, John, invested very much in Matt and Dan, who are the founders of IDVerse. And he saw the potential for them and what intelligence and vision that they had for this sector, and backed them at a really early stage and helped them with exactly those skills that they didn't have. They just wanted to code and build the best anti-fraud business in the world, and he supported them with the business side. Then I've come along and helped to do that as well over the last couple of years.
Because that's rare as well. You often hear as you into the world of venture capital, you often hear the word smart money mentioned, and often it's kind of a bit hollow. Actually, it's just the money, but it really sounds like it was smart money in your case, and you're supporting the business, which is great to see. And you spoke a lot about the different background that you've had, Russ, coming in through kind of advertising and technology, but now you're firmly fixed in the world of digital identity. What got you interested in this field specifically, and what keeps you motivated in this topic?
As I said, so joined the business, knew really nothing about it. I was very lucky when I was at Google, I worked across multiple sectors. So I managed, 10 or 12 different vertical markets. And I'm a market builder and a business builder. And so when I came into identity, there were two things. There was one thing against me, which was I joined OCR Labs, IDVerse, right at the beginning of COVID. So that was a bit of a snag. So I intended on having more time with the team, traveling, immersing myself in the sector, going out as I would, evangelizing, learning, networking. Of course, as we all know, that wasn't possible. So I had time to spend with the team and the business internally because it was very difficult to get into the market, of course, through 2020 and 2021. So in a sense, it was an advantage for me to spend more time with the business and really get under the skin of the product and the team, and really feel the understanding of what they were trying to build and how fraud was stopping fraud was at the heart of what they wanted to do. So I got pulled into that. And of course, with the expertise of the founders and the team that had already built a really successful business in Australia and the APAC market, I was able to leverage that knowledge and work on that while building the foundations of a business here in London so that we could grow internationally. So in a sense, I was pulled into it. I knew nothing about the identity market. It wasn't something that piqued my interest. But the similarities that I see with the advertising market and the growth, particularly now, post-COVID, when the world has become not only mobile first, but the change in terms of KYC and remote everything has driven a huge change in the need for identity. And that's where I think we see explosive growth in a number of areas globally around identity and the need to have that as a central part of everything that we do as the tenant for, shopping online, accessing accounts, government services, etc. So identity's become a very exciting opportunity market like search was back in the 2000s when it hit that pivotal change where technology and the internet was driving the change and the need for information. Now we have a need to identify ourselves in the new Web3 and make sure that we are the people that we say we are when we're doing the things that we love doing more and more online.
Kind of building on that answer then, why are trusted digital identities required?
These days, identity is the starting point for everything. And we know that it's essential to get the correct information from people and from those trusted sources. So I think with so many fake documents being created and fraudsters really at a cheap cost with systems that are really advanced are up there. And the challenges are posed by these are huge. And the need for robust and verifiable identity credentials is really essential. And, we use biometrics a lot in our solution. And we think that's one of the best ways to make sure that you are dealing with the right person, because these documents can be obviously faked. They are being faked. They're being used out there. It's really easy to buy things at a cheap price. But I think with digital, what we're going to see more connectivity directly into governmental identity systems, and the need for those documents will hopefully be supplanted and replaced. But then you're going to need to identify the people who are presenting those credentials once you can verify them with government. So biometrics, we think, is definitely something of growth, and we're seeing huge interest in the area.
Yeah, really interesting. And what are the kind of most common challenges that you're seeing from your customers in the space, Russ?
There's a lot of legacy systems, and we feel like we're going through a new wave of identity, essentially. So, if you think of kind of MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok as phases, we feel like we're at the kind of TikTok phase, and we're an advanced technology companies using some of the latest techniques, things like, of course, Gen AI and automation with the technology and the speed that we have for access. So I think what we see with a lot of people is they use legacy providers who use human verifications, and those humans can often slow things down. Now, I know there's a tremendous value in using humans for some high critical tasks, and some compliance areas do need that absolute 100% certainty in their minds that they need to have the backup of human teams. And so we advise big banks, etc., some of our customers who do have those teams, to trim those teams down and use more automation like we serve in our platform to be able to take away some of that heavy lifting that is slowing down, the user experience and processes. Humans also make mistakes, and they are potential fraud vectors. Internal fraud is a huge problem in a lot of places where there's susceptibility, particularly now in a time of recession, and people are vulnerable to being open to fraud, techniques and offers that are very attractive. And so our customers do see that. They do need to think about using more technology, more automation, and trusting it essentially. And then eradicating the mistakes. Clearly, computer vision and AI can spot, microcosmic changes in documents and people and deepfakes, for example, that these human systems can't spot. It's very, very difficult to see that. So we encourage those customers who are going through those changes as they improve the technology stacks and the systems to think about using new forward-thinking systems that use techniques like AI and automation to drive change within their business.
Got it. And I guess as well, like the volumes of interactions that people and companies are processing online is also going to drive the need for that automation as well, because obviously just being able to cope with the sheer volume of transactions. An interesting part that you mentioned is the kind of AI, and it has many plus points, and like you said, but it also has some negatives potentially as well. So it often used in processing deepfakes. We're seeing that quite a lot today. And so you were obviously seeing that as a kind of threat to consumers and businesses as well. Is that something that you're starting to see?
Yeah, we've been seeing it for a while, and deepfakes are a real threat to society as a whole, to governments, to public personas. They can be embedded in places around the world. Media content. We've seen deepfakes come out on Twitter and other things, which can influence entire swathes of people or decisions on political outcomes, for example, or business outcomes. And so, artificial intelligence has huge potential, and we create things called, we like to think of them as good fakes, right? So not all fakes are bad, and deep fakes are bad when they impersonate something or someone that doesn't really exist and trick somebody into making a decision or right, which is not entirely true. So yes, deepfakes are on the rise. Gen AI and artificial intelligence as a whole is being used by fraudsters globally, naturally. They're very smart. They always have been at using these techniques. So it's important that users understand the differences between a good fake and a bad fake, right? And it's very hard to do with a human eye. So I think one is governments need to have structures, and I welcome the regulation that we're starting to see. I don't know if that's the right regulation on the European, AI at the moment. The summit that Mr. Sunak had in the UK last month, definitely welcome. We should be having thinking around this. We've gone a step further in the sense of suggesting something like a nutrition label. And a nutrition label, when you walk into a supermarket, you should be able to see, what's good for you and what's not on the red, on the traffic light system. We think that AI can have a nutrition label by knowing the source of that AI, how it was generated, was it ethically done, does it comply to regulatory standards, compliance standards, etc. And if you have that, or you have some sort of watermark on AI, I think users will be able to tell instantly, okay, that's a deepfake, but I'm enjoying this content, so I don't care. But actually, if you're asking me to make a decision about something critical, it's a high compliance area, I need to know that that's not real. And I need to make a decision independently. So I think there's more to come. I think it's just the start of this, but I think the awareness is there. Now we need action to start to create these frameworks and structures to support the bad behavior of AI and deepfakes.
Yeah, I also saw that Adobe, I think, has got like a kind of content watermarking as well that I think it mentioned. So it sounds maybe similar to what you're talking about with the nutrition label, Russ. I'm not sure if that's
indeed
similar.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's the start of it. We don't have one yet. We haven't created one, but we're talking about the concept of pulling it together with our partners, with the industry, just so to create a really simple kind of easy way for anyone to be able to differentiate between good and bad.
Yeah, and I think as well, do you see any kind of, and just to labor on the point a little bit, do you see any more like short term? Because often, sometimes these frameworks and regulation is can take quite a bit of time to put in place. But do you see any like technological ways to try and deal with it that would not require the kind of longer process involved in government frameworks and regulation?
Look, I think businesses will always take, hopefully, the good businesses will always take the right steps in order to protect their customers, their users. I think collaboration is key. There's always going to be doubters and naysayers to do that. But I think we each have to do our own things. And so we're trying to create awareness with our customer base. We're trying to protect their customers by allowing this to happen. But I think industry has to get together and collaborate on this. These things always take time. So there has to be bottom up, but at the same time, there has to be top down. And somewhere you meet in the middle. The question is, where is the imperative for change and how fast does that need to happen? Do we need some massively tragic thing to happen in order for them to wake up and go, we should do something? Or is it just slow and iterative? I'm hoping neither happens in a sense. I'm hoping that the industry does move quickly, but I think with the awareness created around AI, particularly across Europe and across the UK and now the world, I think we should see change happening pretty quickly. There are some very interested parties to make this happen.
Yeah, not quite often industry, working together is often the fastest route to fixing problems. So definitely agree with that approach. We talked obviously quite a lot there about AI and how it's evolving the identity verification market over the last kind of short while. What other technologies are you seeing, Russ?
From a technology point of view, obviously AI is driving a huge amount of change because it gives the ability to be able to create identities that don't exist, because the way of acquiring those identities, so obviously you need computing, right? So obviously you look at the NVIDIA chips and the ARM chips, and the hardware is powering the ability to create software and large language models and scale. So that's impressive and really driving change in the business. So for us to be able to create tens of millions of facial identities, biometric identities of people that otherwise would have to be, I don't want to say stolen, but how else do you get that tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people's identities without taking a picture of CCTV or illicitly getting that identity? And so AI and Gen AI is the amazing ability to do that. What that gives us is the zero bias of people within our system. So we have no bias. Now, bias has been built into a lot of technologies in the past because of the people and the programs that have made that technology. So, that's a really good thing in terms of change. I think mobile first is increasing. So it's been increasing for a long time, but now I think we're close to 70% mobile first, which means everyone's got the power in their hands. They can do things quickly. They can get responses quickly. So that's always good. I think user experience is improving with mobile first as well. So if you want to call it the Amazonification of everything, means that we can now do things and not feel, I can't do that. I have to move to desktop. Obviously, there's research, etc. people do on other devices, but I think mobile first is really driving a big change. And naturally, look, I'm on your podcast, which is really about Web3, right? So clearly, AR, VR, and blockchain are big drivers that are going to change where we spend our time and how we spend our time. But I think that user change of experiences of worlds not of our own in something else is going to need a centralized identity in order for people to know that they're dealing again with real people. We've seen the problem with bots on Twitter and other areas where you just don't know if these people are real or not. And I don't think we want to live in that world where we don't know who we're talking to. So I think identity is going to be a key pivotal part of the future of Web3 and particularly the way that technology is going to change and be adopted.
Yeah, very much agree. And I think as well, one of the things about Web3 is everyone always talks about how the UX is terrible. And of course, when you compare it to Web2, which has had 30 or so or many years of an advantage, of course, it's going to not be as good. But one of the things that you mentioned in your response there, Russ, was using things like biometrics to identify people. And of course, that's great UX because we always carry these things with us, or at least we hope to. But given this is a kind of Web3 podcast, obviously the industry is very much a proponent of the individual retaining control over this type of data. What's your perspective on that in terms of if you had a centralized location with all this biometric data, it's potentially quite a large, like a large honeypot and a large risk. How do you think about kind of managing that risk and giving control of that data to individuals?
Look, I think that having having control, I think users should always have control. And I think Web3 is about decentralization rather than the centralization of networks that we currently have, the Facebooks, Googles owning our data, right? So I think people do need to own their data. I think the future is definitely about reusability, about understanding those credentials and where I can apply those credentials. So, we like it. We think that future is very soon and it needs to happen. So I would definitely back the path of going there. I just think when I speak to a lot of industry people who are involved in this, some of the challenges that we have in getting that done, and look, you're a better expert than I am, and I'd love to hear your opinion, but I think interoperability is a big challenge. The way we see things today, for example, like having 140 different government-generated identity schemes across the world, all disconnected, right? So even if you look at our neighbors in Europe, right, we're not even plugged into the EIDAS system. What will that look like for the UK with the European initiatives that are being driven out of there, for example, and having wallets in each country? Even if you look at each country in Europe, if you think about the way people will react to governments pushing wallets, will it be private? Will it be government driven? These are challenges that we have to sort out. We have to sort out the technology infrastructure and the layers to enable wallets to do the interoperability. And then I think relying parties will have to have some way of understanding how to access technology in order to ask for that, credential. And then the user will have to feel comfortable enough passing only a certain amount of credentials. So there's a lot to do. So we're definitely behind the future path of travel. We definitely think it's something that is coming. But I think as an industry and as a global problem, we still have a lot to do to get past that.
Yeah, and in the Web3 space, interoperability is often mentioned, but it's certainly seems a good way off in terms of a lot of these wallets and different types of credentials all working together. It's certainly not going to be tomorrow that's the case. So I definitely agree with what you're saying there. And yeah, if you take the approach that you're mentioning, it's always a trade-off, isn't it? It's not one or the other. It's a trade-off between privacy, security, and then also usability as well. And people that are maybe not super tech savvy being able to use these systems and be part of the online world.
Right, and feel safe in terms of doing that. That not only are the credentials safe on the device that they're using, but that they trust the person that they're passing it to. So that infrastructure has to be weaved in. The good news for the industry is that identity has to be verified on every single device that will be used in order to do that. Now, what it might save is having to repeat that a number of times for all the use cases. So if I'm renting a scooter and then applying for a loan and then checking my pension and then getting government benefits, for example, I won't have to do that, 10, 15 times in a year. I can do it once and then pass a certain, hopefully easily pass my credentials to do that. The good thing about what we do and using the technologies we use is we can cover over 200 countries and territories' ID documents, tens of thousands of documents in 142 languages. So we're inclusive with no racial bias. You're able to, in any country in the world, get onto the system that you want to get on if you were using a technology like ours, right? Which is driving inclusivity, lack of bias, and hopefully everybody in the world should, anywhere, anytime, anywhere, should be able to access these systems and get onto those identity frameworks.
Yeah, very good. And building the coverage that you have, like, so you just mentioned the 200 countries, the 142 languages, building all this stuff must have taken a time, and I imagine it's very complex as well. Could you let us know, Russ, some of the challenges that you faced as a company developing into such a kind of wide footprint?
Yeah, look, we continue to have these challenges. I think data, moving from legacy data in the way that data has been used as a substitute for for reliance or surety. So a lot of companies and a lot of industries ask for multiple sources of data because they're not quite sure and they want to be absolutely sure. The regulatory frameworks don't necessarily need that. But people have done it because these systems are built on legacy. So what happens is you get kind of bad put on top of bad on top of bad. And then you have these really clunky infrastructure systems and flows that ask for all these things where we could just do them digitally potentially. So, and because you have, as I mentioned, 130 plus government ID systems across the world, each with their own, and they're still working it out, by the way. So as I'm sure you know, so some of them are advanced, some of them are backward. Some of them still ask for video verification, like Germany, for example, and France, of an operator who's verifying your identity, despite us being able to do for customers like HSBC and Amex and other people, a fully automated system that knows who you are, what document you're presenting, and with absolute surety can tell if that person's real or not, and the documents. They still need a person, a human, to do that. Now, that is last decade's technology. So that has to move, and the trust in the technology needs to happen. So alignment behind these frameworks, getting behind the regulation, like the trust framework in the UK, which is welcome but is slow and needs to be sped up as well. EIDAS 2, which is coming, but again, that's going to drive some change. You know, we're on TDIF in Australia. Canada is now building some frameworks. The US is waking up and going, okay, I think we should do something about this identity thing. It's too disparate. It's state-driven, not federal-driven. So there is some regulation coming from the Fed and from the government. So we have to deal with all those. And it's difficult when you're a small growing company and you have to have conversations and plug into these different systems across the world. So there's no one easy way to do it. You just have to prioritize where you want to focus, where you think you can add the most value, and try and support your customers in the rollout of these things as you do them. So while technologically we're able to do identification of documents that are real or not in all these countries, plugging in digitally to the new wave of things that will provide and take away documents can be challenging, and something we continue trying to work with individually and through our partnerships.
Yeah. And I'd imagine as well, like, because we see the same issue as well, because the technology is so applicable and it's used in almost every online interaction that we have, there's so many opportunities out there. And the really difficult thing is, I'd imagine specifically in your job is kind of how to go to market, is which ones can you focus on? Because like you said, some of these government departments will suck away your time. They've got extremely vast resources, and you as a small company have obviously a lot less. So it's really hard to cherry pick which ones you go for. So I imagine that's a big challenge for you.
It is. It's a balance between strategic direction of where we want to take the company with the tech we have and the solutions that we can provide, and the customer demand of where we think they'd like to go or they do want to go, and we have to help them to get there. So we're balancing those. The team will grow. We will resource up as we scale, but it's an ongoing challenge, and we have to prioritize. We just don't have the depth of resources that large companies have to do this. So we're hoping to use tech as much as we can to solve for those problems, but some things are still very much human to human, lawyer to lawyer. And you have to go through the contracts and you have to negotiate the best position you can get.
What emerging trends are you seeing in the identity verification sector, Russ, as you kind of build your business like you mentioned?
Look, I think mobile first, as I mentioned earlier, is growing and continues to grow. The power's in our hands, literally, and that's great. I think we still got an Apple, Google, disparity in terms of the system, so you have to deal with that, building for those environments and app stores, etc. But we solve for that. Things like NFC needs to move all phones into the web, and so there's a consortium driven by Google that is trying to drive web NFC. It's a very clunky system if you've ever used it, and because of multiple phone systems can cause huge differing results, and is a very slow user experience and is painful. So I think that needs to evolve. So I think the speed and reliability of information to and from governments, as I mentioned, interoperability with data is starting to open up, but they need to get a little bit better at that. But politics often gets in the way and can scupper plans, right? As we well know, we're living in very troubled times right now, and so priorities do shift with government. So it's difficult. And then setting standards, and because there is no global standard for documents today, actually, forget the ISO standards of document creation, but the actual standards of the data within documents. There is no global standard. So I'm hoping, and I'm seeing actually a huge drive in mobile driver's licenses, which will come with wallets and digitization. There are some global discussions on mobile driver's license standards that will be driven by NIST and others across the world. So if we can all get on the back of those and have one standard, then I think life will be a lot easier, for example. And of course, reusability in wallets, as I said earlier. But I think for us to truly be in the state of where we're using it day to day without thinking about it, we're 5 to 10 years away from scale and getting that infrastructure into interoperability right. So I welcome the future of it. I'd love it to happen quicker, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get there.
You mentioned blockchain. You uttered that fateful word that turns some people off a few answers back, Russ. And obviously a big part of Doc's business is decentralized identity and verifiable credentials. How do you see that from your perspective in the types of sectors that you currently work in, with the types of companies you currently work with? Do you see this type of technology impacting upon those businesses? And if so, in what kind of timescales would you think you'll start to see some decent levels of adoption? By decent, maybe take it as 1 million plus kind of user wallets or credentials in existence.
It's hard to say. I think there's still a lot of questions that are outstanding that need to be answered. And if I step back and think about it, the banks clearly want to have a really strong part in owning the customer. Not only the banks, but the payment systems, right? So, PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, they're all driving these programs because they want to make sure they are the payment pipes that continue to be there as they've done over the last, many decades in terms of where they sit. So they're playing a part. I think the banks are playing a part, but collaboration amongst banks in sectors is very difficult. There has to be real dominance and strong market share to get that kind of collaboration, or a really terrible alternative system, which in my old country, South Africa, for example, because the government systems are lacking, the banks seem to be collaborating and trying to do something. We know BAS in the Nordics, for example, is a system that's worked fairly successfully. It is kind of control. So I see a customer demand is not there right now. I think it's a nirvana that people want to get to, and they see there's a lot of talk about wallets, as I mentioned. I think each of these sectors will try and do their own things. And then we've got to work out, does the government drive it? Is it private sector? If it's private sector, do the tech guys dominate? So is it an Apple Google fight? And do people give all the information over to them, which a lot of people are wary of for obvious reason. So I think we haven't quite worked out where all of it should sit. And a lot of these questions are being asked right now. So I think the demand is not as high from our customers, and the ones that are, I think we have to come up with something and help drive change in the sector. So we want to do an IDVerse spin on reusability within the framework and the context of what we can do. But we want to use our technology and our smarts and know-how and experience to help that become more prevalent for our customers and for future customers.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder how quickly things like EIDAS in Europe, and obviously the directive for governments, so the kind of 27 EU member states to supply identity wallets to their populace, how quickly that will drive all of this change as well. It's definitely going to have an impact, but there's certainly the jury's out on how quickly that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, how quickly can they each mobilize, and do their citizens want wallets from governments? And should governments be the one issuing these wallets? I don't have the answers. I just know that a lot of the questions are being asked. And so while there is a strong appetite from some people, and the Open Wallet Foundation is trying to drive the change, I've spoken to them and to Daniel and that group, and there's some interesting stuff happening. And I'm sure as an open source system, it might drive some change, but there's still a lot of questions to be asked.
Yeah, and like you say,
answered.
yeah, of course, and like you say as well, like you could, against the behemoths of Google and these other types of companies that have basically massive distribution of wallets, it's hard to see that they're not going to have an impact, or a heavy impact.
They have to, but I don't think if we're looking for full inclusivity or one answer, it's not going to be that. It's going to be a number of different things. I think there'll be the technology powering that, and then each government or system will have to either decide, who's best placed to be able to provide that. But the customer has to feel that there's trust. And if you don't trust your government, would you accept a wallet from a government? And then if you don't, then what do you do? Do you not have a wallet at all, and do you not use reusability? Is it an opt-out like we have in the UK, where there's a group of disenfranchised people who don't have identities, who don't have access to technology, etc.? Will that just continue, or there'll be a forced regulation to get everybody onto a system?
And just as a kind of parting shot on this issue, it's very interesting. We speak to people in all parts of the world. The Nordics typically trust their governments, and they're obviously the ones with the most advanced systems. And it's typically the populations that don't trust their governments that tend to be behind, because who else is going to support these types of systems? It's very interesting. Shifting back, yeah. Oh, sorry, Ross, you can say something?
No. I mean, it is. I'm agreeing with you. There's a whole conversation we could have probably over a beer at some point around democracies and socialism and governments, and but clearly that's going to impact the politics of a country and the attitude of its citizens towards the government and the trust of it.
Yeah, of course.
So,
and I'll definitely take you up on that.
I think
exactly.
That's another conversation.
Yeah, and I'll definitely take you up on that beer at some point as well.
For sure.
Kind of shifting back into identity verification. I've heard it in a few different places, but there's been a problem certainly in the past with discrimination based on race, age, and gender. So I'm interested to understand, is that still an issue? And if it is still an issue, how are you guys able to try and tackle that?
Look, I think there is. I think there's a discrimination. It's gotten better in the development of technology, as we know. So it was very much a white male sport, if you will, pastime, and that's evolving. So we see more female engineers coming, more people of color, but there is still bias in there depending how you train your model. So that's why you need this kind of nutrition label. You need to be really cognizant of how you do train. Now, what we do in terms of our generative adversarial networks for the Gen AI that we do create is we have consistent sets of data in order to not have bias built into the engine. And as I mentioned, we did a study, 1,500 people globally in 8 different continental areas across the world, including a transgender subject. And we came back with 0 bias in our biometric technology. So we're very proud of that. And yes, it's only one test. It's 1,500 people, which is a pretty good representation. But because we've created this technology out of synthetic ID, our synthetic faces, and use Gen AI to do that, we can train consistently without having a bias in the person training the engines or the programming. So it's important that you do that and continue to do that, because the world is diverse. The world does need inclusivity for sure. And if you exclude people, then not only are they disenfranchised as they have been because of their gender or their race previously, but they'll continue to not be able to access the systems and services that they should be able to, just as anybody else in their situation. So that needs to change, and systems are still definitely biased or prejudiced against people of color and of a certain gender, females particularly. So the world's evolving, and these systems need to change. We're really confident that the systems we build are inclusive, and will continue to do that, because it's the heart and the center of what we do. And it's been around since the beginning and inception of our technology and our customers. And we believe in inclusivity as a business. And so we'll continue to drive that change and keep those standards up.
Yeah, great to hear. Respectful of your time, Russ. You've been very generous with us this morning. So just a kind of final question to wrap up, bit of crystal ball time. What do you see as IDVerse's priorities for the coming year?
Look, number one, and never changes, is stop fraud. Right? We need to help our customers and their customers not be taken over by fraud. Fraud is a terrible scourge. It's increasing because we're in a recession. Times are difficult. People are open and susceptible, as I mentioned earlier, to fraudulent activities. Fraudsters are using technology to find vectors in offline systems and online systems that are weak. And so businesses need to continue to do that. And we will continue to support our current and new customers and partners to make sure that they effectively and efficiently stop fraud. And that's our number one goal. We will continue to build new and exciting products. New and exciting products in our core markets, which is still the APAC region. EMEA and the UK are one of our biggest growth areas, and the US is a very, very exciting opportunity. So we'll continue to do that. My go-to-market team will continue to do that, hopefully as efficiently, as rapidly, and as productively and profitably as possible for us. But we want to continue to drive change within this market and show that good, in fact, great, can be done with new systems and new ways of doing things. So we'll continue to be disruptive and we'll continue to force change across the world. But fraud is our number one priority. We must stop it.
Yeah, fantastic. And a good point to leave it. Russ, is there anything else you'd like to let any of our listeners know before we wrap up?
No, listen, have a great holiday season if you get to have one, and relax. It's been a difficult year for many of us and the world, I think, as a whole. It's challenging times out there. So take care of yourselves and loved ones, obviously, and let's go again in next year. So we continue to fight the good fight. Yeah, but thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Russ Cohn, thank you for coming on Identity3.
Thank you, Nick.